Greetings, do-it-yourselfers. So your favorite YouTube do-it-yourselfer here. Well, some of you guys not such your favorite, but you watch anyway, don't you? But I actually have plans tonight, thus the reason that I am dressed in garb that is not really conducive to what we are going to do here. But my plans are attempted to be interrupted by a tow truck driver who is supposed to drop off a car tomorrow, but because of the New Year's holiday schedule here, he actually is dropping it off to me in a few minutes. So the idea is I want to see if I can just get a diagnosis here without having to change clothes. We've got a cranking no start, sort of a cranking no start. So to fill you in on the symptoms, we've got, I don't even know what it is. It's a 2002, I think it's a GMC Jimmy. It might be a Blazer, whatever. And what the owner states is that the car has apparently died at a parking lot. He's afraid to drive it out of the parking lot. The car starts, runs briefly, perfectly fine, and then just immediately dies. Starts, runs briefly, immediately dies. He says that he was able to drive it all the way across the parking lot where it died, then he couldn't restart it. So a little bit of an intermittent problem here. Not sure what's going on, hopefully something simple. So anyway, the guy did the right thing. Rather than try to drive it here and get stuck on the road, he has it towed over, and we will go ahead and take a look at it. All right, well, this is not working in my favor, as what often happens. The battery is dead because the keys were left on in the ignition. So the battery is completely dead. I can't even try to crank it. This is also a little bit frustrating for me because the owner said that when he was driving it across the parking lot for a while, the check engine light was on. So that was our source of direction, which I am sure is long gone now. So let's get a charger on this thing and see what we can do. Well, it looks like with the funnel in the paper here, there's probably some kind of leak with this car, I would imagine, but whatever. Let's go ahead and charge this thing up and see if we can start it. Well, obviously, the whole purpose here is to get some direction to start with. I might as well go ahead and see if we're lucky and have the codes reserved in the vehicle while we're charging it. We do not. Actually, I don't think that's showing up there. There we go. Sorry about that. So over here, we've got no diagnostic codes. Now, is that because there were no codes or because more likely we lost them with the battery power? So let me charge this thing up a little bit longer and see if we can get maybe a diagnostic code to pop up while we're starting, if we're so lucky. All right, while that charges up, of course, my thought process is focused on thinking what the possible variables are that could cause the symptoms as the owner described, which I, of course, am eager to reproduce. And one of the things is I can already hear a lot of the people out there that happens after every video in the comments, and these people always, to me, I imagine that their voice kind of sounds like Towley from South Park, and they're going to say, always start with a visual inspection. And my response to that is, of course I'll do a visual inspection once I have an idea what the hell I am looking for, if it's fuel, spark, timing, whatever. But I am not about to look around this engine for something when I have no idea what I'm even looking for. My favorite to this day is some viewer that said every time a car comes in with a problem, the first thing he does is spray it down with brake cleaner. Again, awesome idea if you know you're looking for a vacuum leak. I don't know if there's a vacuum leak here, so I'm not going to spray it with brake cleaner and then come to find out it's an open secondary ignition problem. So we want to be smart here and get a direction. I cannot get a direction until I can reproduce the symptoms. All right, this thing should be juiced up enough that I can go ahead and see if we can reproduce this start, short run, and then stall symptom. Well, as you can see, I was unable to reproduce the running of the engine in any way, so that means I'm going to have to go ahead and treat this with what I have presented in front of me. Of course, I want to keep thinking that we've got a running engine that then dies. That is not the evidence I have in front of me. Being a scientist, I am going to go with the evidence I have in front of me. I'm going to disregard the other information and go with what I have right now as evidence, which is a cranking no start. This is the approach that I have no other choice but to take logically. So Doing that means, of course, I'm going to employ my fast tech procedure. That'll be fuel, air, spark, timing with the cranking cam, timing with the ignition, and compression. The first thing I'm going to do is triage that, and we're going to put compression at the bottom. It sure sounded to me like the compression sounded strong and even. Of course, that's not quantitative, but we certainly can triage that as less likely. The other thing is that maybe we can see if we've got a check engine light that came on. Well, we can see we do not have any codes that have popped up for us during the cranking, so we have to go at this raw. So this is sucking by the moment because I really need to get this thing done. We have a Schrader valve on these engines, I know for a fact, so fuel pressure is a pretty good bet, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. So, but I don't want to really get all dirty doing a fuel pressure check. These engines are really easy to check spark. Let's just do spark first just to see. All right, I really, if at all possible, want to do this without getting dirty. So let's just plug a spark checker in here. I think that'll probably be good enough. And just testing at the coil here. All right, well, we got a little lucky on our first guess there, but that was just strictly because I just don't want to get dirty. So spark was the easiest to check. We now have our direction. Now I can do my visual inspection. We know that we have a no spark, or at least an intermittent no spark problem possibly. But we definitely have no spark here. By the way, I might point out that I am very glad my modus operandi is not to take every single car that comes in here and as my very first step douse the engine in brake cleaner, considering that the whole focus for the rest of this video will be my attempt to generate an ignition source. So think about that. But we need to, first of all, check. We are testing at the coil here. So we are not even feeding to the distributor. That means we need to do some checks at the coil here and see if this coil might be bad. All right, lots of things I could do here, but I'm really tempted to take my scope out, of course, right now, but I can't do that because I promised you guys I wouldn't use the scope in the videos so we can show how to do this testing as any other normal do-it-yourselfer would do. I think the first thing I want to do is check and see if we've got feed to the coil. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, my first step is to see if we've got power on this coil. So let's see if we can get the DVOM in view. And I think that should be okay. And I actually don't really know what I'm looking for here, but this is clearly a power feed here. So I've got a pink wire and a white wire. Actually, I take that back. It's white with a black tracer. I'm going to be pretty confident here. I don't know for sure, but this pink wire has to be a power feed to the coil. And I imagine the white and black wire is going to be something going to the ignition control module or PCM or something. So let's just see if we can figure this out, because I'm not totally sure. And so far I haven't gotten dirty yet, so I'm pretty happy. Let's just see if we've got voltage there. And wow, we only have 6.8 volts, so that may be a problem. No, actually, if I remember, the engine was dying as I was cranking. The battery, I mean, was dying as I was cranking. So that may be battery voltage. Let's just go ahead and find out real quick. Let me go ahead and just check battery voltage right now and see if that's also 6.8. And it is, so that's exactly what the problem is. So that's not our issue there. That also means I need to get this charger back on, by the way. Well, we've confirmed that we've got the power feed to the ignition coil, but that, of course, doesn't mean we're getting signal to it or that we have the ground and all that, so we need to test that. Whenever I'm in these situations here where I will admit it's looking pretty bad for this ignition coil, I always think to myself, what would Scotty do? And then I do the exact opposite. So I am going to get a lot more data to conclusively rule this thing out rather than just replace the ignition coil in 3 minutes. And actually, most every hack would have replaced an ignition coil by now anyway, I'm sure. But we need to see, and the problem is that I really don't have time to pull up a wiring diagram. So let's just see if we can figure out what our controls are here. And we've got another pink wire here. We've got a couple of white looking wires. One's white with black stripe, another one's black. So I guess we got a pink is going to, of course, be the power, and then the black, I'm sure, is going to be the ground. One of these is going to be a signal input, and I don't know which one, but it's got to be one of these white ones, right? That's just common sense. So let's see if we can figure that out. And I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to put this charger back on. So we'll have to deal with that whine for a little bit, I guess, but our battery is really, really weak as it is. So let's try this method here. All right, let's get our DVOM in a shadow there, so hopefully there's not a lot of glare. And we've already determined this pink wire is definitely the positive, we know. And this black wire's got to be ground, right? So let's just try that real quick, and it is. So there's our 12 volts. Now, that means that one of these white wires has to be a signal input. I'm not quite sure what the reason is for the two white wires. One of them has to be a signal. The other one may possibly be for the tachometer, I guess. I really don't know. But we want to find out which of these is the input signal. So we'll just have to do that by trial and error. And actually, an easier way to do this is going to be with a test light, actually. Let's do that because it'll be a little bit easier, and this DVOM is kind of hard to see with the glare. All right, my apologies for the video quality for the rest of this video, but I am really pressed on time, and I just want to get this diagnosis done. So normally I'd explain thoroughly what I'm doing and have this video on my other channel, actually, but what I'm going to do is I'm just taking a guess here that the white wire makes the most sense to me, that that's probably going to be the ignition signal input. And I've got my spark tester back in place here, and I'm just going to use a test light here to go ahead and put in my own input signal to this coil. I just want to rule out if this coil's bad. That's all I care about right now. I really need to get this done, so let's just see. And check it out. I don't know if that's showing up in camera. Hopefully it is. Yeah, that's showing up. So right there, would you replace the coil in this car based on that information right there? Well, 98% of people certainly would, because they wouldn't have even gone this far. This car does not need a coil. I am willing to bet that this is going to be some kind of cam or crank sensor problem, because that's basically what I'm doing, is I believe the crank sensor, I'm not too familiar with which responsibility is for spark, if it's the cam or the crank. I do think it's the crank. But the problem is we didn't find any codes, and I really would have expected that. But this proves we're going to eliminate the coil as a possibility. We're done with that. So I think the next thing to do is I'm going to set up some tests to find out if we've got a problem with cam or crank sensor here. So what I want to do now is, and actually in retrospect, I forgot to look and see if we even had any RPM signal on the tachometer while I was cranking. I guess I got a little bit thrown off because of seeing that there was no spark here and then just jumping to the coil. But anyway, hindsight's 20/20, and this will all be apparent in the comments after this series, I can assure you of that. But what I want to do is pull up a PID for engine RPM, see also if I have any PIDs available for cam and crankshaft position sensors, and we will go from there. But my bet is that we are not going to see an RPM signal here, which is going to be a strong indication we're going to chase that cam and crank sensor thing. I don't know if it'll be the cam or crank. I am hoping if it has to be one, it'll be the cam sensor, because I know that's going to be located on the distributor. The crank sensor, I would have to get under the car, and that is not going to happen because it is winter in Denver, so my garage floor is completely tracked with salt and mud and grime from the winter roads, and I haven't had time to clean my garage floor. I am not laying down on that in these clothes. I wouldn't even do it in my garage clothes because I'm a princess. So we're going to find a much more intelligent way of doing the testing if it comes down to a crank sensor problem. But that floor is probably also about 20 degrees. I am not going to get all dirty and muddy and greasy and everything just for this car. So the plan here is to diagnose this car with my brain instead of getting dirty and grimy here. Engine speed right there. And actually I noticed there was a cam thing. Well, there's cam sensor high and low. That actually would be good for seeing if I can find a crank sensor input, but I can't find a crank sensor input here. Although maybe engine speed is the only crank sensor input. I just don't have enough familiarity. Again, you know, a professional might just know from memory what the responsibilities are for the inputs. I just simply don't have that luxury. I always have to figure it out. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go with engine speed right now, because if I see engine speed here, then I'm going to say that we've got a problem for sure. But I don't anticipate that we will see it. So let's get this car cranked over, see if there's enough battery juice to crank this car and give us an engine speed reading. Well, as you can see, I'm really struggling with that weak battery, because you got to remember, I've always got to have the ignition on when I'm doing these tests. So it's just really a frustrating problem right now because of that tow truck killing the battery on me from the very start. That's the way it's going to be the rest of the video, I guess. But there was no RPM signal there. I am safely convinced that at this point I need to start doing some camera crank sensor tests. And I guess I could do some research right now, but I'm really kind of in a rush to get this done. The other thing too is I'm just hoping that the battery just wasn't so weak that that was a variable that I'm overlooking here. Let's just try cranking this over one more time. Actually, check that. Better idea. Let's go back and see, because we haven't checked if we've got any trouble codes that popped up. Oh, we're going to actually have quite a few. I'm not even going to look at the trouble codes. Let's just clear them. Well, let's not. Let's go ahead and look. But the trouble is, I know I caused a lot of trouble codes with messing around with that coil. I'm sure I did. Wow, look at that. No trouble codes. I don't even know what to say about that. Okay, well, I don't have to clear them then. Why am I not getting a trouble code here? It's got to be with this weak battery. So let's do this. Let's charge up the battery a little bit more. I just want to be absolutely sure that this is the direction we're going. But right now, I'm going in the direction of camera crank inputs. I'm not sure which one yet. I need to get some more data to narrow this down. All right, I think I've got enough charge where we should be able to get a more realistic reading on our engine speed signal. So let's try that one more time. Wow, it started. I don't even know what to say about that. Wow, and it just died. I don't even know what to say about that either. Let's see if it'll start up again. Well, no such luck, but you can see the battery is dying again. And also, while it still had a little bit of a healthy crank, we noticed that we don't have the RPM signal now. So I'm really thinking we've got a camera crank sensor problem for sure. We are going to go in that direction right now. All right, this car is starting to tick me off, and my hands are not as clean as they were when I started. So I'm starting to get a little grumpy here. But one of the things is that I know a lot of people might look at that and say, well, that could be a fuel problem. And I agree. If I didn't already look at the spark problem and we had that happen, I would have actually said, wow, this is really similar to that Jeep we saw a while ago, and I would have chased fuel. We haven't done any fuel checks, and the reason is because there is no evidence to do that. And this is the part a lot of people struggle with. Yes, it is possible that once again we have a car that has a camera crank sensor problem and a bad fuel pump. That is possible, but it is highly unlikely, and once again, there is no evidence to that regard, and I'm not going to chase that down when I know for a fact that I've got a no spark situation. I'm going to fix that first. If we still have a problem, then I'll go look at some other symptoms, but I'm going to fix what I know we have in front of us. And the other thing too is let's check, because I think with the car having run, I don't think we checked for the check engine light again, did we? So we may actually have a code now on the computer because we did have the engine run and it died, and that might help us out a little bit. So let's check the computer before we do anything else. All right, let's check, see if we got lucky and got a code. I didn't even think to check if the check engine light was on when I got it running. It surprised me so much. Oh, yes, we do. We have a P0335. That is a crankshaft code, crankshaft position sensor code. We do not have a camshaft position sensor code. That does not necessitate that we don't have a camshaft problem, but this is what I was hoping for. So now we have confirmed our direction 100%. And unfortunately, this means with it being crankshaft position sensor, yeah, with that being a crankshaft position sensor code, the trouble is the crankshaft position sensor is going to be by the harmonic balancer. I'd have to get under the car, and that is not going to happen. So we're going to come up with a better way of doing this. Let's see if we can test that at the PCM, because the PCM I just noticed is just right here. So how hard is that? Doesn't take too much of a brain to figure out what we're going to do next. The only problem is now I do need a wiring diagram. My choices are either get a wiring diagram or crawl under this car. Let's think here. Yeah, we actually are going to have to crawl under the car anyway, unless I get signal to the PCM. That is not likely. Yeah, it's time to change into my superhero clothes. All right, I actually feel more comfortable in this than I do my sweater. Ah, wait, we're missing something. There we go. Now, let's fix this bitch. All right, I'm trying the best I can to get a shot of this, but this is just not easy from this angle. And this sucks. The floor is wet and it is freezing. But I'll tell you this much, you do a few of these shots in the winter, and then you can come back and tell me if it's not a good idea to start a pay channel and quintuple your income. But whatever. But luckily, actually speaking, god dang it, sorry guys. Let me get you back up here. All right, now I gotta worry about the camera too. But speaking of the pay channel, we covered Hall effect sensors, which I can see this is definitely going to be a Hall effect here. And as a matter of fact, the wire colors are a little misleading here. We actually went over this. So I can see here, I don't know that you're even seeing anything with this, but I'll work out something that's fair for you guys in just a second. But I can see we've got what looks to be a red, actually it's going to be purple, a yellow, and a green. And what's interesting here is I know from my other video when I did the diagnosis and understanding on Hall effect sensors and cam and crank sensors, that on the crank sensor, the green wire is actually the 12-volt feed, believe it or not. So I actually have a little bit of a head start here. So what I am going to do is, to make it easier for you guys and also for me, is I'm going to use a test light because we know we've got a 12-volt feed, so this should show up really nice and bright. All right, so the green wire is, again, going to be the 12-volt feed. Now, I forgot which one is the ground. Actually, I believe the purple one is the ground, so it's backwards, kind of what you would expect. So what I'm going to do is probe the green wire here, and I'm going to turn that charger off. Let's see, yeah, the lights are on. So the ignition is on. Let me turn this charger down. All right, excellent. I've got enough aggravations as it is. And what we're going to do is just, first of all, verify we've got a 12-volt feed. So sorry for the camera work here. That's going to get better in a second because we'll use the test light so we can see what's going on. And we want to be really careful here because, again, remember, we're dealing with a 12-volt. I'm going to hook up my test light to that. And we should see the test light when I hit the signal. So actually I can just reach it from here. Let's see if that's in the camera. Oh yeah, totally. All right, so let's look for this test light to light up, and we want to be really careful here that I don't ground this out. And, uh-oh, well, test light's not lighting. Oh, ain't that a bummer? So now I want to check to make sure that I've got, it doesn't go on the ground or the signal either. So let me go to a chassis ground right here. And I know that's off camera, but it is not lighting up. We do not have 12-volt feed here. So that's actually, in a way, good news, because I was betting this would be the crank sensor, and I wouldn't be able to get one with the holiday here. It's New Year's at the time of the filming. So that's actually, in a way, a good thing, but now I'm worried about the PCM. Either that or we have a wiring problem, or my test light isn't connected, but I can guarantee you that that's connected. Let's check. So let's do this. Let me take my test light lead and put it to battery positive and at least see if I've got ground and signal. Well, so much for staying clean. Let's test our ground here. All right, good. So you can see the test light works. So I'm going to go over to ground here. Okay, did you hear that? We just did a signal bypass. I think the air injection reaction just jumped there. So that's good. So we've got continuity there. We see the test light lights with the ground. Yeah, you can hear that the bypass works. We just simply don't have 12 volts here. We do not have a 12-volt feed is exactly what it is. But everything else works. So where's my 12-volt power? Now we need to go to the computer. This really sucks. All right, I've back probed the 12-volt reference wire for the crankshaft position sensor at the PCM here. So obviously we want to see 12 volts there. I've got my ignition still on, and I kicked my charger loose accidentally, so I want to hurry up and do this. But I can't find my test light again. I don't remember where I put it. God, I'm just frustrated because I really have other things to do besides this. But anyway, I talk about how to do this on my other channel. So like I said, I'm not going to apologize for not showing exactly what I'm doing here because I am really pressed for time, and the information's available elsewhere anyway. So I'm just going to use my DVOM, I guess. So let's set this up. Okay, that looks like there's no glare there, so let's just check for 12 volts here. If we've got 12 volts here, I'm going to be really happy because it means that the PCM is not the problem. Let's see if I can fit this in here. Actually, I can just touch it to the pin, can't I? Oh, look at that. Great. Oops, knocked my pin loose, but I definitely saw 9 volts there, which is about what we've been using as battery voltage. There we go. So we do have power from the PCM, so that is a great sign. The only trouble is there is no question about it. We now know what's wrong with this car, and it's just obvious. We have an open between the PCM and the crankshaft position sensor on our 12-volt reference wire, and that is guaranteed. So we need to figure out, well, I guess it's not guaranteed because one possibility is that I didn't have my test light connected down there, but I most definitely did. Actually here, this is, how easy is this? Let's just verify that we have an open for sure. All right, simple enough here. I've just run my black lead from my DVOM right down to the crankshaft position sensor connector. I already still had my probe in there, if you remember, so just connect it up to that. And then I can just take my red probe, and I've got my meter set to continuity, and we'll look for continuity, and we will not find it, I am sure. And we do not find it, so that is exactly what I was expecting. Now, one of the things, we've got that intermittent here, and what I'm going to do is just kind of go down there and tug on the wire a bit. Actually, let me set a sound on there so that if we get continuity, we'll hear it beep. And I'm just going to go under here and see if I can tug around and get... Oh, did you hear that? Yeah, there's definitely an intermittent open here. Let me see if I can tug on this wire a little bit. All right, check that out. Now we've got continuity. So we definitely have a problem with this wiring somewhere in this harness. As a matter of fact, if I were to plug this harness in, this car would start. Actually, there's no need to do that. Here's what I'm going to do because I really don't feel like bringing the camera back under the car. I'm just going to set up our old friend the spark tester again here so that you'll be able to see that now we will have success with our crank sensor bypass. So let's make sure that we've got that in view. I need my test light. Where is my test light? Well, I still can't find my test light, but here's what I've did. I've still, if you remember, I've got my black lead from my DVOM that is on the 12-volt reference signal that I believe now is going to actually have 12 volts to it. I'd like to show that by using my test light, but I'm going to do this a better way. What I've also done is I've fed a wire down there so I don't have to lay on the ground and do this. I've fed a wire into the ground so that all I can do is just ground this signal out, and we'll be able to now verify both that we have 12 volts at the feed, but also that we've got PCM integrity and everything. I'd rather use my test light for this, but again, all I'm doing is just being a Hall effect sensor. That's all I'm doing, so I'm not worried about this. So, it would help if I turned the ignition on, wouldn't it? All right, the battery is just so weak, I hope it'll even make a spark. But there you see our spark there. You can also hear the fuel pump runs. There goes the air injection. But most importantly, we can see that now we have spark. Everything's working. This car is going to start now. Now, the only thing is I don't know where this open is in this wiring, but I suspect that it is. I can see, I don't know that I can show this on camera. All right, well, this is the best I can do, but if I use a long screwdriver right here, you see where that is on top. It's actually touching, literally touching the exhaust manifold, and it's just completely burned up there. And I'm pretty sure if I could move that away from the exhaust manifold, we would be able to reproduce our continuity coming and going again. But I don't know that I'll be able to take everything apart to effectively repair this. So here's my plan. So what I'm going to do just to get this guy by is I've got plenty of wire. I'm just going to back probe the connector for the crankshaft position sensor with 3 wires that I'll feed up to connect to the PCM for the 12-volt reference for the signal and the ground, and basically just bypass that area. And I think that will get him by just fine until I can fix the car properly. Actually, I'll be surprised if the guy even brings the car back as long as it's running. But I think that'll get him with his New Year's plans. That'll get me with my New Year's plans. And it'll just get him by until I can do a proper repair. So let me fix that, and then we'll make sure this car runs. All right, let's give this thing a test. God, that thing has been on the charger long enough, so it should have no trouble starting now. All right, much better. Much better. And then let me just go ahead and tug on my handiwork here. Yeah, that car will stay running. I'm not even worried about it. All right, glad that is off my plate, but boy, don't I feel stupid. If I'd have just started with a visual inspection 10 inches above the connector for the crankshaft position sensor, I would have been able to fix that in just a minute, wouldn't I? And I'm sure we'll see people in the comments saying they would have done that. Whatever. But most importantly, at the time of release of this video, I really want to wish you guys a happy and safe new year. Thank you so much for your support. And if you found the video helpful, please thumbs up. And by the way, if you thumbs down the video, then I'd like to suggest a New Year's resolution for you guys who thumbs down the video despite the fact that you watch every video all the way through and learn something new every time, even though you'll never do this stuff. New Year's resolution suggestion to quit being cowardice little bitches and actually leave a comment on why you dislike the video despite the fact you watch them all. And maybe if you left that feedback, it would help me to improve the productions to your specific liking, but I can't do that without your feedback. So my suggestion for your resolution, actually grow a set of balls so that I can actually see what I'm doing wrong. But if I don't get that feedback, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because it's working just fine. So anyway, Happy New Year to the rest of you guys, and thanks so much for your support. Be safe this holiday so that I can see you next time.